Have you ever felt so tired that you thought about just disappearing? As if nobody cared, as if God had forgotten you, and the pain inside you was greater than any desire to continue? If this question gave you goosebumps inside, then this video was made for you. That night, I decided it was the end. I wrote my letter, and there, between tears and silence, I said goodbye to the world. But something I can't even explain changed everything. Because at the very moment I gave up, the faith I thought I lost found me at rock bottom. And when everything seemed too dark, a light entered that room. Literally, it was the beginning of a transformation that can only be explained with one word: miracle. This video is not for those who are well. It's for those who are screaming inside, for those who carry old pain, regrets that weigh too much, and sleepless nights trying to understand why God hasn't responded yet. But He responds, sometimes with silence, others with something supernatural. I'm not a preacher. I'm just someone who was broken and rebuilt by Him. My pain became testimony. My fall became purpose. And if you can bear to watch until the end, you might find that your story isn't over yet, because there is an invisible line between despair and a new beginning. And it was on this fine line that God found me. Now, before continuing, take a deep breath, because what comes next is strong, and it might be exactly what your soul needs to hear today. What if I told you that you are not alone, that there are people here right now willing to pray for you? Because this channel is not just a space for stories. It is a place of faith, healing, a new beginning. And if you've made it this far, maybe God is calling you to something greater. Then make a prayer request in the comments. Write down what is hurting you, what is weighing on your chest. Or if you don't want to say everything, just comment, "Pray for me," because I will read it. I will pray. And not just me. There's an entire community here that will stand up for you. This is spiritual. This is real here. Don't underestimate the power of sincere prayer. It was a prayer in silence with tears in my eyes that brought me back to life. And maybe it's your prayer today that will change everything. So leave your comment. Let the sky move over your life. And if this video spoke to you in any way, leave a like. It's not just a button. It's a way of saying to YouTube, show this to more people who are suffering in silence. And if you haven't signed up yet, do so now. Because every week there is testimony, there is word, there is a story of overcoming and transformation with God. Here, pain becomes a bridge to miracle. Here, the fall is just the beginning of the comeback. And you won't want to miss what's yet to come. I no longer saw any point in living. It was just guilt, loneliness, and an unbearable silence. Nobody knew, but I had already given up. And you know what hurt most? It was the fact that, even surrounded by people, I felt completely invisible. As if my existence were a weight, a mistake, something that not even God looked at anymore. Early mornings became a refuge and punishment at the same time. It was there, lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling and trying to hold back crying, that I felt most far from everything, of life, of faith, from myself. And then comes that cruel cycle, the mind repeating that it's not worth it, the heart full of sorrows, the mistakes, of the past screaming in the soul as if to say, you will never change. There is no going back. No one will forgive you. Maybe you know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe you are experiencing this same silence right now. And that's why I'm here, opening my heart, not to victimize myself, but to show you that there is hope, even in the darkest valley. Because deep down, no matter how much I told myself that there was no way anymore, something inside me still wanted to be seen. I still wanted to be heard. I just didn't know how to scream. It was in this silent desperation that I wrote that letter. Yes, the letter, the last one, where I put everything that had been trapped inside me for years. It was an outburst, a confession, a request for forgiveness, and a goodbye. As I wrote, I was shaking, but deep down, I just wanted someone, one day, to understand how I felt. Who knew that behind a fake smile, there was someone broken, begging for relief? Guilt was a prison. It made me believe that God would never look at me again, that I had already wasted all the chances, burned all the bridges, And it is at this point that many give up on faith. They think they have made too many mistakes, that they have fallen too much, that they have sinned too much to be restored. But let me tell you something with all the love and truth in the world. There is no fall so deep that God's hand cannot reach. The faith that I thought was dead was just dormant, and God, He never walked away. I was the one who hid, and maybe that's your case too. Maybe you walked away thinking that God has forgotten you. But what if, even now, He is calling you back? What if this video is the breath that ignites that flame you let go out again? It's no coincidence that you're here. It's no coincidence. It's an answer. It's a sign. God knows where you are, what you feel, what you don't tell anyone. And yet, He loves you. He wants you. He calls you. The overcoming you are looking for is not in yourself, but in the one who transforms stories with the touch of a miracle. I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here to remind you of who you are. Someone who, despite everything, can still live a new story. You are not a mistake. You are a target of grace. And this pain you carry? It can become your greatest testimony. If this is speaking to you, if, in some way, you feel this message is for you, then help me reach more people. Comment the sentence below, "God still sees me," or, if you prefer, "I want to start over." And if you want, open your heart, share your prayer request. I will pray for you. And who knows, maybe other people here too. Why? This isn't just a video. It's a meeting, a chance, a fresh start. Maybe you're also tired of pretending that everything is fine. Maybe, like me, you think that God has forgotten you, that He no longer hears you, that your prayers have become empty, that the faith that once sustained you has faded away inside your chest. It's hard to keep a smile when your soul is falling apart inside, isn't it? You get up every day, wear the mask of normality, talk to people, but no one has any idea of the abyss you feel inside. And it keeps piling up. The frustrations, the regrets, the unresolved traumas, the pains that you can't even name anymore. There comes that feeling of failure, of inadequacy, as if everything you touch goes wrong, as if life is punishing you for something you don't even fully understand. I know what it's like to live with the feeling of being on the sidelines. I know what it's like to silently beg for an answer from God and hear nothing. You begin to believe that perhaps you are not worthy. That was so wrong. Who sinned too much? That no one, not even God, would have reason to want you back. But that is the cruelest lie that pain tells. And she is silent, treacherous, because it keeps moving you away from people, from faith, from hope. And when you realize it, you're alone in your room, surrounded by thoughts that seem to push you further and further down. It was exactly like that with me. I walked away from everything, from the people who loved me, from God. I convinced myself that there was no longer a solution for me, that all that was left was to disappear. And then comes that dangerous moment, when pain turns into indifference, when you no longer feel anger or sadness, just an emptiness that consumes everything. And I know there are a lot of people living this same void right now. People who smile in stories but cry in the shower. People who publish verses, but at night they wonder if God still loves them. People who no longer know how to ask for help because they are afraid of judgment, contempt, abandonment. People like me. People like maybe you are now. But listen, even in this place of silence, even when everything in you believes it's over, there is something inside you that still pulses. And this pulsation is a sign that life is not over yet, that there is a purpose even in the midst of chaos. God doesn't give up on you, even if you gave up. He continues to see you, hear you, and He still has plans for your life that you can't even imagine. Sometimes all we need is a word, one sentence, a sign, something that breaks the cycle of pain and opens a small crack for light to enter. And if that crack is opening now, if this video is that little light that reaches you right now, then let this be the beginning of your comeback. You don't need to have all the answers now, but you need to take a step, just one, a gesture, a simple prayer, one comment. I sat on the bed, wrote everything I felt. I asked for forgiveness. I left the note there. I took the medicine. I turned off the light, and I waited for the end. It was as if my soul had completely surrendered. There was no longer resistance, nor fear, just tiredness. That kind of exhaustion that can't be resolved with rest, but with relief. I thought the only way to silence pain was to silence life itself. And at that moment, nothing made sense anymore. The past was a film of repeated mistakes. The present was suffocating. And the future, I didn't even see a future anymore. Everything seemed finished. As silence filled the room, time seemed to freeze. My eyes were heavy, my heart even more so. But it was there, at the darkest point of my existence, that something happened. I didn't hear any noise. I didn't see any bright lights, but I felt it. A presence, a peace, as if time had stopped just for God to reach me. It was subtle, but unmistakable. I knew I wasn't alone in that room anymore. And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I actually cried. Not a cry of despair, but of relief. As if, even without strength, someone was holding me. As if, even after everything, God was saying, "It's not over yet." I didn't know how to explain that. I still don't know. But it was as real as the letter paper I left on the table. God came into my room, and He came in a way that couldn't be ignored. It was as if He said without words, "You are still mine. I still see you. I still want you." And when you feel that kind of touch, everything changes. Not all at once, not like magic, but something inside starts to break. The shell of pain, the hardness of the heart, the disbelief, everything starts to give way. That night, I was not completely healed, but I was interrupted by grace. The death I chose was confronted by the life God still wanted to give me. And, you might be experiencing that same silence right now. You may have written your own letter, even if only in your mind. You may be in a dark room without strength, without hope, thinking that no one will come. But I'm here to tell you, God still enters dark rooms. He still invades moments of endings with unexpected beginnings. He also transforms stories marked by pain into testimonies of overcoming, of faith, of real miracles. Maybe no one knows what you are facing. Maybe you hide everything very well. But God knows. He sees you beyond appearance, besides the flaws, beyond guilt. He sees all of you, including the part you hate about yourself. And yet, He loves you, calls you, and it gives you the chance to come back. If this moment is touching you, if you feel something different now, comment below. Come into my room, God. Write this down. Let this phrase be your cry today. And if you want to open your heart, post your prayer request here. You can be sure you won't fall into the void. We continue together, because it's not over yet. There's still more, and the best is yet to come. It was at that moment that I heard a voice. Yes, a real voice. She said, "You're not going to die today. It's not over yet." It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't my mind trying to protect me. It was something that came from outside, but touched so deep that it seemed to come from inside me. The voice was firm, smooth, but loaded with authority. It was as if each word cut the veil of pain that enveloped me, and, for the first time in years, I felt something I no longer knew how to describe. Hope. A thread, almost invisible, stretched towards me. A thread of life. A breath of faith. At that time, something changed. Not completely, not instantly, but enough for me to open my eyes and realize I was still there. I was still breathing. And for some reason that I didn't understand, God had decided to reach me. This left me in shock. Why me? I, who had given up. I, who had turned my back on everything. I, who believed that God didn't even hear my prayers anymore. How could He want to talk to me right now, at my worst moment? The answer came little by little over the next few days. The memory of that voice never left my mind. It was as if it echoed inside me, as if repeating, "It's not over yet," and it haunted me, in a good way. It was a constant reminder that the death I chose was intercepted by a love I never knew I deserved, and this love began to transform me. I started to question everything, my thoughts, my beliefs, my judgments about God. I started to remember things I heard as a child, forgotten verses, songs that talked about starting over, healing, liberation. God was rescuing little pieces of my faith one by one, like someone rebuilding a broken soul with their own hands. And then, I understood. The voice that interrupted me that night wasn't just to stop me from dying. It was to invite me to live, not just any life, but a new life. A life with purpose, a restored life, a journey of transformation where every pain, every fall, every wound gained a new meaning. Because when God enters the scene, he doesn't come back just to console. He comes back to restore, to lift, to rebuild stories that the world had already considered lost. Maybe you too are waiting to hear this voice. Maybe all you need now is a confirmation, something that says, you still have value, you still have a future. And I want to tell you that if this message reached you, if you are listening to this now, this is the answer. This is already God telling you, I am here. Even if everything seems to fall apart, even if the pain suffocates you, even if the past condemns you, God still speaks. God still acts. God still wants you. And what he started that night with me, he can start now with you too. If you feel that this voice also needs to echo within you today, comment below, "It's not over yet. Write this sentence," she declares. Let it. Leave the paper and enter your spirit. And if you want to open your heart, if you feel like you need prayer, write your request here. Here is a space for listening, for welcoming, for faith in action. It's not just a video, it's a new beginning. Let's continue, because God still has something to say. I woke up, not in hell, not in the hospital. I woke up with a peace I had never felt before. Something in me had changed. I don't know how to explain it in exact words, but it was as if a war inside me had stopped. The weight in the chest was still there, yes, but there was also a new lightness, a different silence. No longer the silence of God's absence, but the silence of someone who knows that God is present, even if in silence. It was as if my heart said, "You have been touched, and nothing will be the same as before." I remained motionless for a while, trying to understand what had happened. I remembered the voice, the phrase that still echoed strongly inside me. "You're not going to die today. It's not over yet." And as much as logic said that it was just my mind trying to save myself, something stronger inside me screamed, it was God. For the first time in a long time, I didn't fight this idea. I accepted, I received it, and something started to reorganize inside me. It was the beginning of a spiritual transformation that I didn't even know I was ready to live. I got up from the bed slowly. I walked to the window. The world outside remained the same, but something about me was different. That constant pain, that suffocating guilt, that emptiness that had accompanied me for so long, all of that seemed to have receded. It wasn't completely gone, but it no longer had the same hold over me. I was alive. I was conscious. And more than that, I was being called. I felt in my spirit that this had not been an accident, nor an emotional coincidence. It had been an encounter with the supernatural, a divine visit, a deliverance, a calling. In the days that followed, everything became more intense. I began to remember old prayers, promises that I had forgotten. I found myself crying out of nowhere, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. It was as if God was cleaning the rooms of my soul. Every painful memory, every cursed word they threw at me, every mistake I repeated thinking it was my destiny. He was dealing with everything, one by one. I felt it. And the more I opened up, the more I realized I hadn't just been saved from death. I was being restored to life. And this is much deeper than it seems. Because there are people alive on the outside but dead on the inside. There are people who breathe but have lost the meaning of existing. And I was that person, until God entered, until he touched my spirit in a way no one ever could. No advice, not psychologists, not religion, only him, only grace, only love that surpasses understanding and breaks chains that no one sees. And perhaps right now he is trying to do the same to you. What if this pain you carry is precisely the place where God wants to meet you? Have you ever really thought about this? Because we tend to think that God only manifests himself when we are well, when we are clean, strong, spiritually ready. But this is not what the Bible shows. It's not what life shows. God has always chosen to reveal himself in valleys, in deserts, in the prisons of the soul. He always took pleasure in appearing in the middle of confusion, in the middle of chaos, in the middle of nowhere. And maybe it's right there, in that dark place where you are now, that he is calling you to a transformative encounter. The pain that you try to hide may, in fact, be the bridge that God wants to use to bring you back to him. That guilt that you carry in silence, That voice that tells you that there is no way out. That memory that insists on making you feel unworthy. None of this scares God. He doesn't stay away from your mess. He approaches. He looks at you completely, without a filter, and still chooses to love. Choose restore. Choose to rewrite your story, because God is not impressed by our sins. He moves because of our sincerity. And if there's one thing that touches God's heart, it's someone who, even in pieces, can still say, "God, I need you." This sentence already changes everything, because when you admit that you have reached the end of yourself, you also open the door for the supernatural to begin. It is at this point that faith is truly born. When strength ends and grace begins. When you understand that you no longer need to support yourself alone, that you can throw yourself into the Father's arms and trust that He will hold you. And He holds it. He doesn't let go. He does not despise broken hearts, tired hearts, wounded hearts. I discovered that pain, no matter how cruel it is, can become a path. It can be the fertile ground where God plants something new. And I'm not talking about religion, rituals, ready-made formulas. I'm talking about relationship with God. To hear His voice within, to realize that He still speaks, that He still heals, that He still responds. Sometimes the answer comes in a video like this, in one sentence, in a comment, in something that seems simple but hits you straight in the heart. And if you're feeling this right now, if something in you moved, if a tear fell and you didn't even understand why, don't ignore it, because the Holy Spirit has subtle ways of saying, "I am here." Perhaps you have never experienced this presence. Maybe you grew up hearing about God but never had a real encounter. Maybe you even walked away, disappointed in people, in churches, in yourself. But God didn't give up calling you. He still sees value where the world only sees failure. If this pain that consumes you is exactly the place where God will heal you, would you be willing to let Him act? Would you be willing to give up control, even if you don't know what comes next? Sometimes the only thing that separates pain from restoration is surrender. A sincere delivery, even without understanding everything. What if this is what God is expecting from you today? If this word spoke to you, comment below, "Find me in pain, God." Let this phrase be your prayer. And if you want, write here in the comments what you're feeling. Your prayer request, your pain. Here, you will be read. You will be welcomed. You're not alone. We will continue together, and God will continue speaking, because He's not finished yet. Today, millions think about giving up, and maybe you are one of them. But I am living proof. God still speaks. God still saves. No matter how many mistakes you made, how many times you fell, how many nights you cried in silence thinking no one was listening, God was there. He always has been. Even when you ignored Him, even when you screamed in outrage or fell silent in deep sadness, He didn't move away. He didn't give up on you, because His love is not based on what you do, but on who you are, son, daughter, His creation, chosen to experience something much greater than the pain you are facing now. I know sometimes faith seems weak. That trust seems impossible when everything around is falling apart. When the bills keep arriving, when the marriage is hanging by a thread, when the children are lost, when the heart is full of guilt, hurt, or loneliness. I know. And that's exactly why this message needs to reach you. Why, even in the midst of chaos, God still has a plan. And it's not a plan of destruction. It's a plan of hope, healing, a new beginning. It's a living promise. It's rebirth. My life was lost, fully. And it wasn't religion that saved me. It was the voice of God. It was His presence that came into my dark room and said, "It's not over yet." And you know what else? He continues to say this every day to anyone who will listen. And maybe today it's your turn to listen. Maybe this video, this word, this moment here now, is the breath your soul is begging for. God is still speaking. The problem is that the noise of pain is sometimes so loud that we can't hear it. But when the heart starts to shut up, when we decide to stop fighting against Him, then His voice becomes clear. You are not invisible to God. It doesn't matter how much the world ignored you. You are not a failure. It doesn't matter how many times you fall. You are not despicable. It doesn't matter what they said about you. You are loved. You are important. And God still has plans for your life. Maybe you can't see that now, but all He needs is for you to take a step of faith, even if it's shaking, even if without strength, a step from someone who says, I don't want to live alone anymore. I need God. And if you've made it this far in this video, at this point in the message, I'm sure you're not here by chance. This is a calling. That's an answer. This is care. How many times have you asked God for a sign? What if this is the sign you've been praying for? What if these words are exactly what you needed to hear to get out of bed, to breathe deeper, to not give up today? You are not alone. Even if everything seems lost, God still writes stories, including yours. And perhaps right now, He is just beginning to turn the page on a chapter you thought would be the last. Because our end is often the exact point where God decides to start something new. He specializes in rebuilding what has been destroyed, in resurrecting what was already buried, in making sense of what seemed irreversible. It doesn't matter what they said about you, nor what you believe about yourself. God is not based on your failures, but on the purpose He wrote for you before you were even born. There are people who live as if they were condemned by their own past. They carry guilt that has not been resolved, regrets that suffocate them, traumas that shape their way of living. I understand that. I was that person. I lived for years with the feeling that I wasn't worthy of forgiveness, that God wouldn't want someone like me anymore. But what I discovered, in the pain, in the valley, at rock bottom, is that God doesn't write stories with an ordinary pen. He writes with grace. He writes with mercy. And when He decides to start a story again, He erases what you thought condemned you and begins to call you for what you will become. That's why you're still here. Because there is a purpose. And God doesn't waste pain. It transforms. It redirects. It cleanses, heals, rebuilds. Maybe you don't see it now. Maybe everything around you is still dark, but that doesn't change the truth. You are on the road to restoration, because what He started in my life, He wants to do in yours too. Every wound, every tear, every lonely night, all of these can become part of your testimony, not to embarrass you, but to show the world how powerful God is to restore broken lives. Do you know why? Because when God enters a story, He doesn't just fix it. It transforms. He takes shame and exchanges it for honor. He takes rejection and pours out love. He takes the pain and delivers healing. And He doesn't just do this with the saints, with the right. He does it to the tired, with the failures, with those who have already thought about giving up. He does it to people like me, with people like you. And that's why I'm here, opening my heart to tell you, no matter where you are now, your story is still being written by a God who only knows how to create surprising endings. Maybe you feel forgotten. Maybe you think no one cares. But God cares. He sees you. He knows you. And He still has plans for your life that you can't even imagine. So even without understanding everything, even without feeling strength, hold on tight, because the next chapter could be the one that changes everything. And when you change, it will be so that other people can see the glory of God in your life. If you felt that this word was for you, comment below. Write my story, God. If you want, open your heart in the comments. Post your prayer request, talk about your pain, or just write a word that represents your moment. Here, you will not be ignored. Let's move forward together. God is still writing, and there is still a lot of history to live. If this story spoke to you, write in the comments, God found me. And now, watch the story of someone who also wanted to die, but was saved by a miracle. Because stories like this are not just exciting stories. They are signs. They are called. They are spiritual bridges between a wounded soul and a God who continues to rescue. When you hear a testimony like this, and something inside you starts to move, to get warm, to get emotional, it's because the Holy Spirit is touching places that no one else can touch. It's no coincidence. It's divine intervention. And perhaps, at this very moment, He is meeting you at the most sensitive point of your pain, not to expose you, but to restore you. God is in a hurry when it comes to rescue, because He knows that there are people with their hearts in silence but begging for help. People who no longer say anything, but inside they are screaming. People who are tired of praying, but still continue to wait, even if in the depths of their hearts. And maybe it's you. Maybe you're hanging by an invisible thread, trying to understand why you're still here. And I tell you, you are still here because God is not finished yet, because the purpose He has for your life has not been erased. The plan continues, the promise still stands, and the miracles have not yet stopped. I know how cruel the world can be. I know how words can hurt more than punches. I know how rejection can bury someone alive. I know how sin can make you believe that you will never be looked at by God in the same way again. But all of this is a lie from the enemy, because God's forgiveness has no expiration date. His mercy is new every morning. And grace, the one that reached my room on the darkest day of my life, is still moving at this very moment, looking for willing hearts. Hearts tired, broken, but still open enough to say, Lord, if you still want, find me. And He wants to. He always wanted to. God's love is not scared by your past, your addictions, your relapses, your mess. He sees all of this, but chooses to see the purpose before the pain. He sees what you will be after the transformation. He sees your testimony ready, even if today everything is in ruins. And this process of healing, restoration, reunion begins exactly here, now, when you decide to listen more than feel, when you let God's voice be greater than your tiredness. If you felt God's voice in this video, if at any point in this story something touched your heart in a different way, then this channel is for you. It's not just about videos here. It's about encounters with God, about testimonies that heal, about lives that are being transformed day after day. So, if you are not yet registered, click the sign up button now and activate the bell. Because every week there is a new word, real testimonies, stories that build, free and renew faith. And I want you to be part of it. If you made it to the end, comment below, I heard the voice of God. This phrase will show that you didn't just watch, you were caught. And I will keep an eye on these comments, praying for each person, responding whenever possible, because here, no one walks alone. Oh, and before you leave a like. This isn't just for engagement. YouTube understands that this content is important and is starting to show it to more people who, like you, need this word. Your like could be the bridge to someone's miracle. And now, don't stop here. There's another story appearing on your screen, a real story, of someone who also thought about giving up, but was transformed by the touch of God. Click to watch, and let God continue speaking to you, because the journey of healing, faith, and restoration is only beginning.